Hello there, and welcome to the Second Life Book Club. My name is Draxtor Dupre, and today on the show, Simon Hahn with his exceptional debut novel, Nights When Nothing Happened. The book is about a Chinese immigrant family, two kids struggling to adjust to America, Texas to be precise, Plano, Texas. Oh my God. The parents are struggling with aligning their own different upbringings from back in China. The kids are struggling to find their roles within the family unit and within their own friendships with their peers. This is such a good book, and it hits so close to home for me as a former stay-at-home dad. The son is now almost 18. There is a constant but very subtle sense of foreboding in the book. The perspectives, they alternate between the different family members, mother, father, son Jack, and the little Annabelle, the 5-year-old. Welcome, Simon. Thank you so much for coming. Congratulations to this achievement.
Hey Drax, thanks for having me. This is so fun.
I don't know why you're in a spacesuit. There's no space-suited person in the book. I thought like, oh, Simon is requesting a space-suited avatar. Maybe this is a sci-fi book. Is your next book a sci-fi
Um,
book?
Maybe I don't know. I think I don't know. I often feel like an astronaut when I'm in Plano, Texas. So maybe there's something there.
And you were born in China, so you're always
Mhm.
oh wow, you just actually brought up a helmet here. I,
Oh,
ju- I
where did
s-
that come from?
oh, Arjun just gave you a helmet. I think he just brought it there to hide. That's perfect, Arjun.
Oh, thank you. I was wondering where my helmet was.
Now, this is interesting
It's having
because
trouble breathing.
this is this is the topic which I find so fascinating. I mean, the family comes from China. You were born in China and you come straight into Plano, Texas. And I have a slide of Plano. I was never there, and it now that I know how it looks, the book also makes even more sense than it already does. But do you
Hmm.
still feel like a little bit like an alien or an outsider? How long have you been in America?
Hmm.
When did you come? At what age?
Well, so my trajectory is a little different from the boy in the novel, in that I was born in China, and then when I was just like 1 year old, I moved to Texas with my family. So I grew up in Texas in America. Um, you know, all my memories started in
Right.
America. I didn't actually start in Plano. I started in College Station, where Texas A&M is, and moved around various cities in Texas, including Houston. And then, but for a majority of my adolescence, I was in Plano, and I've been away from Plano for so long. But in the past year, I moved back to the Dallas suburbs in a suburb near Plano, and so I've been here for a year, and
Hmm.
I do think that it's still a place that um, it feels both, I guess, intimately familiar to me at times, but also deeply foreign, and I guess that's where the whole
Hmm.
astronaut feeling comes from. Um,
I just brought up the
yeah,
slide here. I mean, our American audience may be familiar with these types of, the type of scale of these type of
right.
suburbs, but we have a lot of people from other parts of the world, and I mean, it looks alien to it looks alien to me, and it's interesting because you mentioned. Um, Being home and what does home feel and all these things we're going to talk about today. The boy you mentioned, Jack, in the story, he was born in China, and his both his parents in the book, they
Hmm.
leave him in China as they go to America. So that's a really important part there for his obviously for his formative years, but also how he acts in the whole narrative. I mean, I found that so uh, heartbreaking. I mean, he stays with his grandparents in China,
Hmm.
but that you grow up the first, what is it, 3 or 4 years of your life, or 5 years even, or six, without your parents, and your parents go to different. I mean, how do you
Right.
even explain this to your child ever?
Well, yeah, I was always fascinated by that because that was supposed to be my trajectory. Like I was supposed to also be raised by my grandparents because my dad was going to be a graduate student. My mom was going to eventually be a graduate student, and it was just the they just didn't have the resources, the time, or the financial resources to really support me, and so they were going to kind of build that home for me while I would be growing up for the first 7 or 8 years of my life with my grandparents. But there was sort of a last minute decision that my parents made to take me there anyway because they didn't want to miss out on those years.
Mm.
And I think as a result, I was this huge burden on their lives, surely. But but that is a kind of dynamic that a lot of immigrant families with young children go through. And I have a lot of friends who, um, were separated from their parents for the
Mm.
first years of their lives, and I was always fascinated by that experience of having to meet your parents again,
Mm-hmm.
which is what Jack has to do when he comes
Mm-hmm.
to Texas.
Mm-hmm.
He's heard about them and he's seen pictures of them. He's talked to them on the phone, but you're supposed to meet these people who are supposed to be um, your caretakers, the people closest to you in your lives, and yet they feel kind of like strangers. Meanwhile, you're in a place like Plano, which is already so alien. So
That
I think
is
there's just a lot of
exactly. So you're
right.
alien in an alien place, and you are there with your caretakers who are also somewhat alien to you in an alien place, uh, tasked with protecting you and tasked with guiding you through this world. I mean, that's interesting.
Mhm.
So, but as you say, I mean, this seems to be um, quite common. I mean, I completely understand economic reasons, but to explain this to a child later on seems incredibly difficult. At least sort of in the middle years, I guess there will come a time then when you reach adolescence where you understand, yes, there is this makes economic sense, and they built this up for me. They put this nest egg together, this home, to give me opportunity. Mm.
Right, and I think a child doesn't always, doesn't realize that, and I think Jack in particular, like he sort of confuses this with there's another situation with Jack. He gets to Plano and his mother is like 6 or 7 months pregnant. So he sees his parents already preparing for the next child, um, and so I think he tells himself a different story where I came to America um, not because I'm their son and like I should be there with them, but to perhaps take care of my new sister, and so there's a sense of obligation that he kind of forces onto himself, um, and that I think that goes with just the uncertainty, the weirdness of immigration as a child, just not knowing why it is that you're being moved like a piece on a chessboard, right? You don't
Right,
really know why you're being moved,
right,
and
right.
so you invent these stories.
And then we're going to get there because you have a great the excerpts. They really show this. I want the camera to zoom out a little bit and show us what we tried to replicate, or Ruby rather, who built this magnificent set. And she read the book too. I read it and
Yeah.
she read it. Sometimes I just relate the themes to her, and she just sort of puts it together, and it always fits. So here we see one side of the street is a nice spacious homes that were we sitting in the illuminated section, and sort of foreboding in the back are these huge skyscrapers, and on the other side of the street are the same houses, but there are much more run down, um, and we're actually literally floating on within this background of this huge city. And on the side of the road, we have little floating images from China, from Shaanxi province. I hope I pronounced this correctly, and Tianjin, which is a rather big city, and we're going to get to that too because both parents, Patty and Liang, they both have such different upbringings in China that um, their conflict. I mean, there's usual uh, marital issues, but they already have an intercultural conflict, and then they're in this planet of Plano. Um, so he comes from the countryside, and she comes from a large city, and of course we also have here on the set these people, kind of fake people, busy, happy, going somewhere. These people that are standing next to each other, opposite of us, behind the audience. Um, they're all there, and they all seem like they have something in common, or that they have a certain communal sense of things, but they're all alienated from each other. So um, that's the set, and the universality of this story, Simon, really fascinates me. The fact that the main protagonists are immigrants from China is very important. Like I said, I mean those challenges to fit in, um, they are compounded. But I, as a as a white middle class guy, can completely relate to all these issues. You're finding your role as a husband, finding your role as a neighbor, supervisor in the job, as a child within the family context. I mean, wh- yeah, this is just there's no
Hmm.
question here. I'm just in awe that you were able to create such a universal look at this conflict that is somewhat unsolvable, I guess.
Yeah, well, thank you. First I want to say thank you to Ruby for making this set. It's stunning and it really captures like the eeriness that I wanted to get across my book of a place like this. Um, and just it feels so perfect to kind of explore on in a place like Second Life. Um, but but yeah, to your point, Drax, about
I guess I had a question
this
like if you
yeah.
remove the Chinese part out of it, would it still work?
Mhm. Well, I think the systems that the characters are find themselves caught in, we're all caught in that, right? No matter who we are. I mean, there are like there's very culturally specific aspects of this experience. Um, but we have like a family who is essentially like grappling with the same things of trying to like how do you present yourself as a good neighbor, as a quote unquote like successful um, resident of your community, a successful kind of American, um, and a lot of that is predicated on things like um, how you fit in, and so
Yeah,
it is definitely easier for certain people to fit in. Um, and they take different and the characters in this novel like take different you know strategies into doing that. Patty, for example, is probably you see her at work where she's one of the only women um, in her semiconductor company, and she has learned to really um, find a level of authority by just sort
right.
of doing the work and staying being this constant presence at the office.
Constant
um,
total workaholic, and the I mean the tragedy is
right.
also that Jack comes uh from China, and then he doesn't see his mother either because she's constantly
Right.
at work. Mhm.
Right. And it's I she is in many ways a workaholic, but that's also a strategy. It's it's her way of um, perhaps her only way of advancing in that kind of environment.
Mhm.
Whereas you have someone like Liang, who is probably not as good at fitting in, or especially as the novel progresses and things get a little bit more dire for him. But he has this instability in his life growing up, and he hasn't really carved out a role for himself within Plano. um, he is this kind of he's not the breadwinner of his family. He he kind of makes people uncomfortable. His language skills are not as refined as Patty's,
That's why I relate
and
to him so much because I was not the breadwinner when I was a stay-at-home dad, and I had a
Mhm.
German accent in America. No, but you're putting the finger
Yeah.
on something that's interesting. I want to jump in here because Liang, to me, his role uh, could have been, and it kind of is to me. He is a really wonderful dad. He's a very well-meaning
Hmm.
um, father, and he can um, engage the kids. I mean, you have him in these scenes, and that's why the thing then the conflict that then unfolds is even more tragic because that could be his role in that community. That's how I read it. Uh,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it is tricky because these sorts of again, they're all like grappling with narratives of that are projected onto them. I mean, you're. I think I agree that I think Liang is a fairly good father. I think he certainly has some issues with like expressing himself, but uh, the fact is he doesn't fit into the model father, the model suburban father who sort of takes care, is the one that is like in charge of his family. If anything, he's following Patty and dependent on Patty for a lot of
right.
things. He even finds himself kind of uh, like ceding control to his own children. And I think all of that stuff bubbles up when he compares himself to the other father, someone like the white father who ends up going to their Thanksgiving Day party when things really go to shit, and he sees the level of control that this other father has, the way that this other father feels almost more at home with within his own home.
Well,
this
that's well,
this
that's
this
the
white
American
father has.
way. Yes,
Right,
you're
right.
right.
This is a guest in his own home, and yet he's walking through it as if it is uh, his own home. So yeah, that's a particular struggle that he keeps facing.
Now I want to read because this is a perfect spot. I'm gonna stand up here and ask the magic book stand to appear because I want to read a little bit here about Liang the father. And dear audience, fear not. Simon will read too. I know you came here to listen to Simon, not necessarily me, but this is a section that is just so perfect, illustrating what we're talking about. And this is Liang, the father, walking home slightly drunk from a poker game with his friends. They're all immigrants from China and Taiwan and some other places. And he walks home here and he thinks about his 5-year-old daughter, Annabelle. Annabelle gets into trouble a lot at preschool with a girl named Elsie. And Elsie's parents feel Annabelle is kind of a bully. She's too rough with their daughter. And Liang also thinks about his poker pals that are sort of quite passive as well as he sees them, and he also thinks about his relationship with his wife, Patty. So I'm going to read this little excerpt here as he walks home. Maybe something was wrong, Liang thought. These men, his poker pals, had bodies like storm battered palm trees. They were wobbly men who made sturdy moves in the game, only to go home and become wobbly all over again, snoring into their wives' turned backs, waking up their children for hugs they did not wish to give. And Liang had become one of them. Or worse, Liang had always been one of them. What was it Patty had accused him of doing the other day? Hiding. Not from anything in particular, just hiding. The kind of father who would rather endure his daughter's suffering in private than fix what troubled her in daylight. Will you do something now? She demanded of him again last Friday after Annabelle reported that Elsie had invited her for a play date over the break. What kind of bully invites over his prey? He'd asked. Could a 5-year-old be so nefarious? You don't know, Patty had said, why we cling to the people we do. Some days Liang would stare at Annabelle and wonder what she was capable of. Plano Star Care, that's the child care center, talked of activating each child's unique zone of potential. But would it not be better if there were nothing in Annabelle to switch on? No surprises as he watched her grow day by day, year by year. Yes, better his daughter be capable of nothing, not even dying. Better to be a bag of shiny rocks. Liang had believed the teachers when they assured him that nothing was going on between her and Elsie, that the girls stuck to each other like flies on honey. Neither of them were flies, they were both honey, they hastened to clarify. The teacher's assertion seemed more palatable than the possibility that Liang could have come too far only to raise a child who, like him, continued to live in the shadow of danger. Impossible. That was why he and Patty had moved here, was it not? To be in a place where such dangers were impossible, could not even be conceived of. So that's a little excerpt here with Liang from Simon Hahn's Nights When Nothing Happened. Now they move, and this is a theme that comes up time and again. Uh, they move to America to be safe.
Mm.
They move to Plano. So is it America, or is it the suburbs, or is it both? What is so unsafe in China for them? What is that
I,
safety?
mm. I think it's different for each character. I mean, for Liang, I mean, he's someone that since he was a child has had various traumatic experiences, and even moving from the countryside in China to the city, let alone moving from China to America, let alone to Plano. Um, I think in general, though, it's it's this feeling of like constant movement, constant turmoil. Like you can't really feel the ground beneath your feet. And
Hmm.
what the suburbs represent to a lot of these characters is stability. It's the ability to finally to stop moving and to um, actually feel as though you have some level of like that you found this place where you can feel secure. um, but that itself, that's something that I think the characters are projecting onto this place. The
Hmm.
suburbs
Hmm.
are classically great for that. They're like this blank slate that you can sort of make whatever you want it to be, um, because oftentimes the suburbs are already this kind of constructed place. um, and so each of the characters are making it something else. It's like their own version of the city. um, and so what they're hoping, at least someone, especially someone like Liang, is hoping is um, that this will be a place of no more conflict, right?
Hmm.
And I think what they learn as the novel progresses is like the only way to ensure that no conflict happens is to be silent, is to sort of silence yourself and not talk about the problems.
Hmm.
For example, they're worried that their daughter Annabelle is being bullied at preschool. That's what they're fighting about in that excerpt you read.
Hmm.
But Leon doesn't want to do anything about that, and Patty is
Hmm.
like pushing him to do it, and almost appealing to his um, masculinity in a way, like or almost like egging him on in a way, like shouldn't this be your role as the father to do this? But he doesn't want to make waves because he so much wants to avoid conflict.
Hmm.
Because that for him, that's what America and what Plano represents, is this sort of conflict-free zone.
That is really what America and the suburbs specifically, I think, sell to. They're very successful in selling this to the rest of the world. And it's somewhat ironic with all the and we have an excerpt later about the ubiquity of violence. I mean, we don't have to spell it out here. School shootings and so on and so forth. But for some reason, these places still sort of project that, like you said, a blank slate where you can reinvent yourself, and also safety through, I guess, routine and bigness somehow.
Mm-hmm. And it's by design too, right? It's depends on the people you welcome within the community. Historically in the States, like the suburbs really really bloomed after World War II, but it was white middle class Christian homeowners who were encouraged to move there, who were given economic incentives to move there, and then people that fell outside of that were not welcome. And so when
Hmm.
you create very this specific community, well, of course, it's easier then to perhaps avoid conflict, because you basically push away anyone who may disagree with this narrative.
Hmm. This is what we talked about in the production meeting as well. This is, I think, commonly not known around the world outside of the U.S. There is people can look up redlining, how African Americans were
Yeah.
prevented from purchasing homes in suburbs, and like you said, I mean that creates the sense of security comes from is sort of the second step. First, you have to create fear or an enemy, and then you create the solution to that fear, and that's what the suburbs are, I guess, right?
Right, right. And it's not like, these tensions just magically disappear. It's just that, you can strategically move them out of sight. It's the same way there's always like a more modern equivalent is there's always debate in suburban communities of whether to allow mixed multifamily housing, and allow more lower income subsidized housing to be built alongside these like single family homes. And because the worry among the current residents is that then they'll see, I mean, to put it bluntly, they're going to see poor people. They're going to see,
Yeah,
they're worried about running into homeless people. But it's not like these problems disappear. They don't.
yeah.
It's this hope of not seeing it,
Not
to not
seeing it.
have to engage it in it. Yeah.
Exactly. That's wow. That's what Liang is doing. Now I get it, Simon. Thank you. I thought I analyzed this book properly, but we have the source here. If you're just tuning in, we our guest today is Simon Hahn with his absolutely exceptional book, Nights When Nothing Happened. I cannot recommend this highly enough. It is wonderful, and I would like Simon to read an excerpt, and we have an excerpt right from the beginning of the book. Let's see if the book display. Oh yeah, it magically appeared. If I could ask you to stand up and go to the book display. Now, uh, you're going to be reading an excerpt where we get to know Annabelle. Now, Annabelle, and it's interesting, and if you are a parent, you know how this often goes. You get a phone call from another parent say, your child is harassing my child, and then you say, well, your child is harassing mine, um, and then it goes back and forth like this a little bit. I'm talking about a friend, but Annabelle is kind of, I mean, she is in this context, she's perceived to be a, a troublemaker, um, in the context of this other friend, and she's has a forceful nature. I love Annabelle. She is a wonderful child. She has energy, and she is yeah, bossing people around. She's 5, but she's also a sleepwalker. And as we established, her brother Jack feels very responsible for her as her protector, and yeah, and I think we'll take it from here. I think we're reading where Jack wakes up and he sees the door open and Annabelle is gone.
Right. So this takes place close to the beginning of the novel, and so so it's the middle of the night, and Jack goes out looking for his sister.
How does he know that she's
Uh,
gone?
well, he has, prior to this, he's already suspected her of sleepwalking.
Hmm.
He's caught her a couple times. Once he finds her in the bathroom sleeping, and then the other time, he's run into her in the kitchen, and she's sort of just wandering in the kitchen, and he realizes that that she's sleepwalking, and we actually flash back to those scenes later on. But um,
Hmm.
after that, he becomes more vigilant, and he kind of deems himself Annabelle's protector. Again, he kind of thinks that's his role in the family, to be his sister's protector. And so when he sees that open door and he knows his sister's not there, he kind of takes it upon himself to find her.
Hmm.
So yeah, so he walks out, and I'll just read from the middle of that. He found the first of Annabelle's glow-in-the-dark slippers on the Brenner's front lawn. Crouching down, he brushed grass clippings from the plush cotton. He pressed a hand on a sunken patch of grass. He pressed here, he pressed there. A strange thought came to him. Maybe the heartbeat he was feeling did not belong to him, but to the grass and to the earthworms slithering beneath. I can never pronounce that. If he followed the trail of heartbeats between the Brenners and the Driscolls, he would find the other slipper. He rushed forward, staying low and close to a brown fence at the corner of Plimpton and Main that still gave off paint fumes. There's no time to pull up his socks. The cracks between the planks glowed a phosphorescent blue. A swimming pool. There was something about a lighted swimming pool at midnight that reminded Jack of murder and intrigue. A car passed on Main Street, its headlights flashing through the fence and illuminating the leaves floating in the pool. His sister could be drifting toward this vacant stretch of road where high schoolers tore through in trucks with wheels bigger than her, blazing a shortcut out to Sheridan. He followed the path he imagined her taking between houses and down alleyways until he reached the sewage creek that cut through the community. During the summer, he remembered, the feet and underside of a duck had bobbed there for days. On the grass that sloped up from the creek, he spotted the glow of the other slipper. His sister stood a few yards away on the bridge that overlooked the creek. Under a towering steel streetlight, she swayed slightly. Her head was lifted, and a white glow bloomed from her neck up to the stretch of baby fat under her chin. Her eyes were closed, as if she were basking in the pool of light. If Jack did not know better, he would have thought a spaceship had beamed her down to earth. He sidled beside her, a slipper in each hand. He was Annabelle's protector, but sometimes he did not know what to do with his hands. Hear me in there? Knock, knock. Annabelle blinked. You found me, Daddy. I'll stop there.
And that's Simon Hahn with the dangers of the suburb. Wonderful. I mean, this really sets the mood. We should have led with this. People go like, "Whoa, where is this going? Is this Stephen King? Is this a horror novel?" Because this is interesting. When I first started it, and then Ruby was reading it parallel, um, the first 5, 6, 7, maybe 10 pages or so, it could have gone in that direction, right? I mean, that must have
Mm-hmm.
been deliberate, Simon. I mean, you seem to. I'm here. I'm gushing like Terry Gross on, or Scott Simon for that matter, on an NPR interview. But you're so talented. I mean, the way you set this up, it could have gone into this very cliche horror novel, and it obviously didn't, and it doesn't.
Mm.
And nothing
Yeah,
against
well,
cliche horror. I mean, I love cliche horror, and you yourself are a big
mm-hmm,
fan of Dracula, as I learned.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, so there's a scene later on in the chapter where Jack and Annabelle end up walking back home, and they once they get to their house, they see this open door,
Mhm.
and we realize that Jack had just forgotten to close the door once he went out, but in the moment, it's a very eerie image, an open door at midnight in these sort of placid suburbs, um, and it kind of almost feels like a portal to them, a portal to like all different kinds of possibilities. You could walk through that door and find your parents waiting for you, and you could get this warm embrace, and it's a happy ending. Or you walk through that door into all possible horrors, and I think that's kind of the feeling I wanted to give in this novel, that like in the space of the imagination, you can go in all different directions. You can go. Things can be very unsettling when you don't really know exactly what's going on. The unknown is just is eerie.
Now, we actually have another reading right away. One of my favorite scenes in the book is depicting the typical American school day. Uh, Teachers actually trying to have a conversation about how to use language in a certain context of threats, and so I have to ask you to stand up again. Ah, gee, I'm so sorry.
Maybe I shouldn't have sat down.
We'll have you stand. We try to be we try to really accommodate our guests, but then we make them
Oh
walk
no.
around. And in the olden days, people would fall off the stage. But this is another one of those things where the allure or the promise of America to have everything sort of worked out and perfect, especially in the context of violence that can come from absolutely anywhere. This is a really well written scene. And before you read, I do want to ask the camera to briefly go to the front row here because our regular book clubber Ava Bloodrose Delaney actually dressed up as Annabelle, but I think she overdid it a little bit. I don't know if you see her in the first row, but
I
she told me that there is some
yeah.
sort of Annabelle thing in Texas somewhere, like a museum of scary dolls or something. So
So I think I peeked at this on Twitter right before we started, and so I wanted to ask you about this because I I think this museum is actually not Monroe, Texas, but Monroe, Connecticut. But I may be wrong. Uh, uh, but I hadn't actually known about this creepy Annabelle doll. The name was inspired by Annabelle Lee in the Edgar Allan Poe poem, um, and it's actually where the parents got the name. The poem was in this English textbook that they were studying, and so they
ah
picked the name from that poem. Um,
uh-huh.
but uh, I I love it. I think that certainly. I know I've certain readers have have kind of imagined Annabelle to be not too far from that kind of image. So
See,
I
I'm the only one that hasn't imagined it like that. Like as I said earlier, to me,
yeah.
Annabelle is a wonderful. I would like
Mm,
society to change, quite frankly, to accommodate kids like Annabelle, to find that energy useful and channel it in a creative way, rather than everybody wringing their hands and nobody also really sitting at the table and talking about like how do we deal with this type of energy. I mean, that's why I
yeah.
found her character so um, inspiring to actually think about this. Not her having to be mold herself
Mhm.
to what is presented to her. Those these generic conditions here, these cookie cutter conditions, but rather have her utilize this. I mean, this is really a big problem, I think, in today's society, not only in America, mind you.
Yeah, no, I mean, I love that. I love that people can sort of take a lot of different interpretations and feel strongly one way or the other about a character. Um, because yeah, she's certainly the agitator, right? I mean, she unlike the rest of her family, she really doesn't mind taking up space in a room. She actually announces that space and then
Yeah,
makes that space conform to her.
yeah.
She has, you know, she doesn't feel the same pressures to assimilate that the rest of her family does. And so in that way, I it was
Because she was
really
born in America. She has the best and the
yeah,
worst of America in her. The like, here I
right,
am, you conform to me, and also, I mean, the self-confidence that we all kind of envy. Am I right?
right, and it was freeing as a writer to have a character like that, because this is a book that full of restraint and silences and things like that. So it was nice to let loose with a character with Annabelle. But yeah, I happy to read this other
Yeah,
excerpt though. So something I don't know if we mentioned, but this book actually it takes place in 2003,
Right.
And that's kind of important context for what's to come, because this is post 9/11. This is during the Iraq War. This is during a time when you're hearing about, like, you could get anthrax from the mail in your mailbox. That there were school shooters and all that stuff. So it was actually a pretty terrifying time to grow up. So this is Jack. This section is from Jack's perspective as well. Do not say die, his English teacher said. Do not say stab, murder, choke, shoot, or bomb, especially bomb. Mr. Morris rolled up his sleeves. Veins snaked up his arms and under his shirt, like those of bodybuilders or the elderly. Mr. Morris could pass for either. Never say bomb. It was August. Jack sat at his new desk chair, not sure what to do with his legs. The formation of rows and columns left him feeling exposed. In girls, some wore perfume. Scents welled from below their necklines, calling back the candied fruit that he'd once swiped from the street vendors outside his grandparents' apartment. He had not thought about the taste of glazed strawberries and pineapples and shanja for so long, the way he'd slid them up and off the skewer with his teeth. And the vendors, the spittle in their mouths as they raised their newspapers to whack him. The girl in front of him turned around, the end of her ponytail whipping the top of his hand to pass back a stack of letters, each addressed to the parents and signed by the principal. On his way to America, Jack remembered, he had carried a letter too, a letter from his parents, a letter to prove that he belonged to parents, written in English. Is punch okay? A boy asked from the back of the classroom. You can probably say punch, Mr. Morris said. What about assassinate? Assassinate is usually reserved for public figures. What about manslaughter? Manslaughter, Mr. Morris said, as if trying out a name for a newborn. He fingered the swirl of his tie. Well, manslaughter is not a verb. Speaking of verbs, a voice behind Jack said, I'm scared. Heads swiveled around, but no one could identify the speaker. Fingers were pointed in opposing directions, giggles shushed. After class, Jack wondered if he had been the speaker, if somehow he hadn't known. Jack should not have been scared. His parents had decided to live in Plano in order not to be scared. Plano had the lowest crime rate in Texas, highly ranked schools, churches bigger than schools, lighted tennis courts, malls that closed before 9 p.m. After he joined his parents, his mother had called his grandparents to let them know that he was here, he was safe. When forgetful Lao Lao, that's his grandma, had asked where here was, she said, near Dallas. Later, when she introduced Jack to their neighbors, she said that he was from near Beijing. Jack had wondered then if his homes were not only safe, but imagined. He did not know, even by middle school, that in the late 1990s, this affluent suburb had been dubbed the heroin capital of America. Not that, nor that in the early 80s, it had been called the suicide capital of America. Every year, a new wave of residents diluted the collective memory of the city, like fresh customers unwittingly enlisted in a company's rebranding. Just say no was as much as his teachers were willing to tell him. No drugs, no suicide, no fights, no sex, no drinking, no depression, no slacking, and now no saying, you want to die? No more, I'm going to kill you. And though no one had taken those threats seriously before, banning the words morphed them into something serious, something threatening. That night, his mother brought the letter to his room. She lay at the foot of the bed, the balls of her feet pressed into the carpet. Lao Ye, his grandpa, had talked about how, as a child, she'd walk over the knots of his back. Should I worry? She asked. His mother had always been a bony person, a woman of acute angles and protrusions. In the photograph propped against the tin of sunflower seeds, baby Jack had seemed eager to get off her lap. He had not seen the picture since he'd left, but having his mother near made him want to remember her the way she'd been when she was far. Mom, he said. Jack leaned against the headboard with another of his old choose your own adventure books in his lap. The books were too easy for him, but it was nice to fall asleep before reaching the end. When there were multiple endings in a book, the one he arrived at always left him bereft, though he could not say of what. He lost his page. A few ends of his mother's hair fell over his toes. What would it feel like to touch his mother's face with his feet? A privilege reserved, perhaps, for babies and toddlers who would grow up unable to remember what it had felt like to touch their mother's faces with their feet.
And
And on
that's
that
Simon
weird
Hahn.
note, I'll stop.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's brilliant, and you can remain standing, Simon, because we're going to go to the
Okay.
final excerpt right away, and I'm just going to bring up in the back again the slide to get a little bit of a visual on the difference between Plano, Texas. So this is Plano, Texas, now on the back board here, and then we have an image from Tianjin in China where the mother is from, which is a pretty big city, right? I mean, how do we know how many people live there? It's a very modern city with skyscrapers and everything. It's a
Oh yeah,
port
it's
city.
giant. It's like 10 times the size of Manhattan. Um,
Wow.
and you wouldn't, and it's this is China, right? Like there are cities that are not necessarily the known as the big cities in China are, you know, are like 15 million people.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
um, the sense of scale is pretty overwhelming for sure. And Texas is also in a way a miniature version of that, in which the vastness is something that I'm interested in.
Pani in the audience says the population of my whole country.
Right.
And the
I
father Liang is from Shangqi, China, which is very rural villages, and he in the book his father was I think working in the mines. Um,
mhm, mhm.
and we don't want to give away too much. I mean, there's a lot of tragedy in his life, but the difference between the parents' upbringing could not be more stark within one nation state.
Right, right, and it that also creates a level of um, uh, I mean, it affects even the most mundane aspects of his marriage with Patty. Um, but yeah, so should I read this excerpt about Plano?
Yes, this is from
Okay.
Patty's perspective now. So let's put the wait. I
Yes.
put the Play-Doh slide back up, so this is the proper context. This is Patty's, and Patty has a. I mean, she has a good job. Lots of responsibility, exciting stuff. Um, yeah.
All right. So yeah, this is the best way I can think of to describe Plano. So here we go. Plano was a suburb of oven mitts and motion sensors, voice recognition and outlet plug covers, automatic sliding doors, time fluorescent lights, sleep mode, speakerphone, intercoms and cameras in offices and sometimes in homes, sprinkler systems and car washes, air hand dryers. In the shops at Legacy's dimly lit restaurants, a bathroom attendant. Whether Patty Chung received her fajitas at On the Border or Kitchen by Javier, the server would warn as if to translate the sizzling sound, hot, hot. She could point to any necklace under a glass case, and a jeweler with perpetually moisturized hands would fetch it. Flip-flops never went out of season. Patty always wore slippers in the house. Her neighbors, the Crawfords, set their central air conditioning to 70 degrees, and didn't lay their hands on the thermostat until Thanksgiving. The weather could be hot, cold, or just unpleasant enough to serve as the subject of small talk, but still, Patty hopped from home garage to office garage and back without stepping outside for days. Toll tag pasted to her dashboard, she made the 37-minute trip downtown in the gray light of dawn without rolling down the window. On the highway before morning rush hour, Patty towered above the super Walmarts and Hobby Lobbies and their empty parking lots. She switched lanes without using her blinker and rode the HOV lane solo. The 8-person Chevy Tahoe lifted her like a palanquin, not as high as the other Plano parents' Hummers, but still she could spot the dust and bird droppings on the roof of a passing sedan. This felt like an accomplishment. In the gridlocks of Tianjin, she never imagined driving at all, let alone this fast and high. On the highway, no taxis, bicycles, rickshaws, mopeds, or bodies interrupted her. Machines romped across earthwork and concrete, programmed with 2 rules: always move forward and do not, under any circumstances, touch each other. On maps, the northern suburbs veined by highways also did not appear to touch. Plano and Allen sprawled out east of Tollway, Carrollton and open fields and megachurches to the west. Frisco, where houses were cheaper and schools marginally less competitive, sat atop 121. South of George Bush, Richardson buzzed with its Chinatown and growing hub of tech companies, and farther east, Garland paraded its lakes and fancy hotels. South of Tollway and past 635, one could glimpse the mansions of Highland Park. Out of view, farther west, lay the Arlington of Dallas Cowboys and Texas Rangers fame, and beyond that, Fort Worth, the FW and DFW. In Patty's mind, the D consisted only of entrances and exits. In the weeks before she started at Texas Semiconductor, she and Liang had explored downtown Dallas, turning over fruit at the farmer's market, posing in front of the Dandelion Tower, pretending to be cowboys among the cattle sculptures. Taking a wrong exit on the way home one day, they threaded through a landfill in one-way streets, chain link fences, screen doors, car bodies parked on center blocks on overgrown lawns devoid of trees, houses as small as the ones she imagined Liang had grown up in. At least in China, though, the countryside contained formation and vegetation, disarray that felt natural, even when it wasn't. America's landscapes, on the other hand, were not hers to fret about, so Patty told Liang that the flashing take on the dashboard meant that their 10-year-old Volvo had 20 more miles to go, that they didn't have to step foot on streets with no sidewalks or ask for directions at the liquor store by the tents under I-45. They could find any highway among the clot of them, aim north, and before the end of a radio interview, traffic permitting, be back in Plano.
And that's our last excerpt. Brilliant. Thank you, Simon. And we can hide the book display, and you can sit back down. We're racing towards the top of the hour. Now, this is yeah, a brilliant way to describe Plano, but also again what we've been talking about, the fear of, or what is sort of hidden, the poverty, and the places that are supposedly bad. They're hidden from plain sight. Now, my colleague Shyla has researched for the show, and we talked before the show, and she mentioned something called shorthand descriptions, and I want to ask you what that is, because I was thinking while you were reading, we've been during this hour. I mean, I'm guilty as charged. Have used terminology with Annabelle, for example, with the 5-year-old girl. I called her difficult, or she's perceived as being difficult, a troublemaker. I called Patty, the mother, a workaholic. So, I'm guilty as everyone to throwing around stereotypes, and I know in the post game I will look at myself and go like, you know what, I should be really a little bit more nuanced. But a long-winded way of asking you, because I think you wrote about this, Shyla told me about shorthand descriptions. What are those, and
Mm.
in what context should we see this for a writer, the dilemma for a writer?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think you're talking about this essay I wrote for LitHub about the various shorthands that I think when you're writing about Asian American characters, that something that you have to interact with in some way or another, whether you want to or not. An example of this, and a silly example of this that I give in the essay is like bubble tea. It's like
Hmm.
it's become this kind of shorthand for the Asian American identity, a kind of pride that a lot of Asian Americans feel in their love for bubble tea. um,
What does
and
that mean when
and then
you present an Asian American character? You have that character drink
well
bubble tea?
well that's the tricky thing is because I don't even like bubble tea that much, right? And I'm Asian American, right? So the fact is these shorthands are only, they only tell one side of the story, but there's a lot of I think what I wanted to write about in that essay is how do we achieve a level of freedom in how we imagine our characters, right?
Hmm.
It's not that another silly example is like, okay, there's the stereotype of Asian Americans being good at math,
Yeah.
and some maybe you. I always felt this pressure when I was writing fiction to like always write away from the stereotypes, and so in the beginning, it was like, okay, I can't have a single character be good at math. They have to be, in fact, they all, every single one of my Asian characters has to be awful at math.
I see
But
what you say. So that becomes then, oh my God, now then you're
that's
going the
also a
other way.
problem, right? Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. So I think it's just something that we have to navigate, and we have, how do we tell a full story um, without always trying to either indulge in stereotypes or do the complete opposite. In fact, we just want to not think about the stereotypes at all. We want these characters to just um, you know be their messy selves,
Hmm.
full of contradictions,
Hmm.
and so yeah, it's something I'm
You were
still thinking
basically
about, I guess.
and if somebody has the link to this essay in LitHub, please put it in the local chat. I think Shala, you may have it somewhere. Put it in the local chat, and we'll put it on the blog on Monday as well. Alfonso has a great question. Do you think there are aspects from your book that people not coming from China or the Asian diaspora would find hard to understand culturally? I would say absolutely no. But how do you feel, Simon? Or was that something that you were concerned about, where you may have edited some stuff out, or
Mm.
was sort of was that a challenge in writing it?
I don't know that I was concerned about it, but I knew that every reader is going to have a different experience with the content, where you know if you have various culturally specific references or even the Mandarin that's in the text that I don't translate,
Mhm.
if you do know Mandarin, then you're going to experience that differently from someone who doesn't, right? And that's fine. I think that's something that I've learned through this process, is that um, you just have to write your specific story, and then for some readers there will be some barriers, but that every reader has certain barriers to whatever they're reading. I grew
Right.
up reading dead white guys, who
Yeah.
lived experiences that were totally unlike mine, and
Hey,
yet
I
I
read
found a
Conan the
way.
Barbarian, and I say this
Right.
every week. I read, all
Yeah,
Robert E. Howard stuff, and I
exactly.
mean, yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I did imagine myself slaying all these bad guys and getting women and running around in a loincloth. But anyway, sorry, I digress. Sorry, I
No,
stepped
no,
on you. Please
exactly. Yeah. So I
continue.
mean, I think I just at some point you have to just trust your readers to build a bridge to your story, and then there are going to be readers that won't want to do that, and then you're going to have to live with that as well.
Mhm. We are racing towards the top of the hour, and we have in the post game. Please do stick around because in the post game, we have Simon until the bottom of the hour, and Shyla has prepared a poem by Li Young Lee or Lai Young Lee. I think it's Li Young Lee, and you
Liang
write
Li. Yeah.
Li Young Lee, a very important poet, also. Living outside of China, an expat or living in the diaspora, and his poem "Epistle" is excerpted at the beginning of your book, and we'll ask about what the importance of his work is. Um, yeah, I unfortunately have to wrap it up. We're at the top of the hour. Simon, this was absolutely wonderful. And all these questions here in the chat, please do stick around and bring them because I'll capture this as well. Ruby says, I like the part that talks about Jack giving up on piano. Simon, that was you writing against writing against the stereotype, I suppose.
Right. That's true. Yeah.
Um, yeah, thank you, Simon. Thank you, audience. The last question that we always have is, what are you reading? Please put it in the chat. And if I could ask you, Ruby, to cut and paste it and send it to me later. We still haven't found the perfect way to archive that. Put in the chat what are you reading right now? What are you excited about, or what are you waiting for? And then Simon, what are you reading? And as I always ask, do writers actually read, or do they need to watch a lot of television to get a balance of sorts between the different media? Because I don't watch any TV because I work in an
Uh,
audiovisual medium. So for me, the reading is my balance. That's my meditation. So how is that with you?
yeah. I don't know a writer who doesn't read. But I
No, not
I
not
think
at all. But I
yeah,
tell you
yeah.
honestly, I mean, I follow several writers on Twitter, and it's amazing. They talk about television all the time. So I was like, what
Hmm.
are these guys are watching all sorts of television all the time? I have no idea what's even out there. So that, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I love TV too, though, for sure. Um, yeah, I actually we were just talking about this, but I just finished a book that I think would be so perfect for Second Life.
Ah.
Pachaya Subantad's Bangkok Wakes to Rain, which spans two, I think like 2 centuries of life in Bangkok, and follows like a whole cast of characters across different timelines, and then ends in like the future where
Oh.
Bangkok is flooded and people are imprinting their consciousness onto uh, virtual reality. So it just made me think about this, and
Oh,
yeah, and
this
I've
sounds
been what else?
absolutely delicious. Oh, whoa, whoa.
Hmm.
Okay, so you sent me an email about that, and we will contact that author. Please put it in the local chat as well. Um, And oh, here Siri says she's reading Perdido Street Station by China Mieville. China Mieville is,
Mm.
I'm talking to his publicist, and he is coming on the show. I cannot tell you when. He is very secluded when he writes. He's completely secluded. I don't know him personally, but there's only one person that talks to him, and that's the publicist. And I'm talking
Oh
to the
wow.
publicist. Yes, that's how we roll here, Simon, at the Second Life Book Club. Thank you again, and let me run through the slides, and then we have a little bit in the post game to follow up. The Second Life Book Club is every Wednesday, 12 o'clock. You can get in touch with us at slbookclub at draxtor.com. And yeah, the main show is at 12 o'clock. That's 8 o'clock GMT. The show is produced by Strawberry Linden, Shyla the Super Gecko, and myself. Location manager and master builder is Ruby Geek. The avatars are made by Silas Merlin, Ruby Geek, and Kralos. Special thanks to Marianne McCann, Arden Schwartzman, who is in the audience today, AJ McDowell, Theanine, Brett and Patch from Linden Lab, and all the moles over at Linden Lab. Big thanks to the moles. We have a bunch of sponsors: Bad Unicorn, Bespoke Caravan, Blueberry, Creatures, Crescendo, Landscapes Unlimited, Linden Lab, Nomad, Rag VR, Salt and Pepper, Slink, Skin Stealer, The Black Forest, Theanine. Oh, he got in there twice. And what next? There is a tip jar on the side here. Please do tip the volunteer staff. Put your Linden dollars in there right now. Find the calendar, Discord, and Flickr on the sandwich board scattered around the islands. There's a lot of stuff to explore and to recommend authors. SL Book Club at Draxtor.com. Next week, next Wednesday, our guest will be Lauren Boykes. Lauren Boykes is a prolific author from South Africa, and her latest book is Afterland. She wrote a book about, with a little bit of a Second Life virtual world in there. Her newest book is not about a virtual world. It's a really far-fetched story about a pandemic that changes lives uh, around the world for everybody within a matter of weeks. So something that is completely fictional. And that's it. And Friday we have a special show, but it's completely full. If you want in with David Dayan and Cory Doctorow on Friday 9 a.m., please IM me because that's going to be a locked set with limited attendance. But that's at 9 o'clock and it's on the calendar. And I'll see you guys Friday and Wednesday here on the Second Life Book Club.
Thanks so much, Drax, and Shyla and Strawberry and Ruby and everyone for being here. This was a lot of fun.